Entrepreneurs and people who start businesses, one thing that they tend to have in common with one another is an unreasonable level of optimism. Like that, that everybody else is like, that's not going to work. It's never going to work for all these reasons. It's really going to suck. And all the entrepreneurs out there are like, it'll be fine. And it's kind of like they're both right? Because the people who are saying this is going to be harder than you think it is, they're right. But the people starting the business who are like, it'll be fine, they're also right. It just kind of depends on when and if you quit.
The Doing the Work podcast is brought to you by some amazing sponsors who we're very grateful for that allow us to do this amazing podcast that brings you information that helps you to be more connected and be more healthy and helps you grow in your life. The Doing the Work podcast is all about optimal health, community, and personal growth. And here in Bastrop, there's really not a better example of that than Tracy's Drive-In Grocery. The store's been around since 1946. It's got an amazing history. Everyone in the community loves this store. It's a hub of health and connection, and really just still continuing to grow and do better things. They just recently added a coffee bar, which was just voted one of the top 3 coffee spots in Bastrop. And there's a lot more that they're planning to do to better serve the community. So if you're looking for some healthy food, some snacks, some of your guilty pleasures, anything like that, go check out Tracy's Drive-In Grocery. The website is www.tracysgrocery.com. When I knew I was going to be starting a podcast, I knew you were one of the people who were going to be on this show for a lot of reasons. One, you put a lot of content out there through video and through your with your ideas and concepts. And so you're really a natural with this kind of thing. So I, of course, wanted to get you on the show. But beyond that, you've really been you've been someone that I look up to, someone that I see the things that you're doing in the world. I see what you're doing through your business. I see how you've now taken, without taking too much, adding too much to the show earlier, you've taken obstacles in your life and you've still continued to figure out how to make everything work, even if it's not perfect or whatever else. And so I know you have so much to offer, and I'm just pumped to have you on the show. So thank you for being here. Absolutely.
I'm so excited to be here. And thank you, Athan, and not to get into too much of like a hug fest, but you know that I look up to you too. And, it's moving for me to hear you say that, because I have so much admiration for you and it gives me like all the warm and fuzzies. So thank you. But you touched on, a lot of like buzzwords for me just in like the intro. So where do you want to start? Because there's so much that we could talk about.
I know. And that's the thing is I feel like this is going to be one where we're just going to have to cut ourselves off at some point, because there's going to be so much to talk about. But first, before we get into it, not everyone on on their audience knows about you. So how would you like to describe yourself?
Sure. So I think maybe the best way to get into it is how we met, and that'll kind of tie into our journey into Austin. So my husband and I, my husband Chris, who obviously you know very well, moved to Austin. It's been almost 8 years ago now. And one of the first things that we did when we moved to Austin was go find a CrossFit gym, because we had been in CrossFit for many years before that. So we found you very early on when you were still on Airport.
Yes. Yeah. You guys were like right before we moved to the bigger location.
Right. Yeah. We just spent a couple of months with you guys on Airport and then moved over to Fortitude, the Fortitude location on Technicenter. And Chris and I moved here to be in real estate. So we both had some background in real estate from the Northeast. We had lived in New Jersey for a couple of years, and we were young enough and crazy enough to think, well, let's just move to Austin and sell residential real estate. Like, how hard can it be? And many years later, I can say that it was very difficult, but we also survived it. And in one capacity or another, we're still both in real estate. And I run a small team of all women in residential real estate in Austin.
It's funny about the timing that you mentioned, because I wonder, like, do you like, I, from the outside world of real estate, I think now, like, you probably came at the perfect time. But how do you feel about the timing of when you moved here and the real estate?
Yeah, I think timing is kind of a tricky question. It certainly worked out for us. But I remember at the time, a lot of people telling us that it was the wrong time and it was too hard to get into real estate in Austin. And it's a very, it's a city where people know each other and you guys don't know anybody. And how are you going to survive? I mean, there were plenty of reasons why we weren't going to succeed. Right. And I think that somebody could tell someone getting into it today the exact same things. The other thing that I heard, which, is now laughable 7 or 8 years ago, was Austin's in a bubble and the bubble is over. You're at the tail end of it. It's about to burst. It's a terrible time to get into it. Right. I mean, I have been having conversations with people for 7 years where they're like, well, Austin's overinflated. It's a bubble. It's about to burst. They've been saying that for 7 years. Right. And they were saying it for however many years before that. So is there a good time? I don't know. It was our time. I don't know if it was the best time or if I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah. And I think that's big because there's a lot of what you said that I would love people to learn from on this show. One, you took a big risk coming here. It was a roll of the dice. It was knowing you. I'm sure there was calculation to it and it was strategic. But nonetheless, you didn't know how this was all going to turn out. And what was that process like for you? How did you make that decision? What did you have to overcome in order to make that happen? I'm super curious about it.
Yeah. So I think this goes even a little bit further back in time to what caused us to move here. So, and I feel like I'm talking about so much of this with Chris involved too, my husband, but so much of our journey as adults is so intertwined and our businesses are still intertwined in so many ways that it's really hard to talk about my story without talking about his story too. So we had met in college. We were 19 years old when we met and we started dating shortly after that. So we were 20 when we started dating. So we've been together for 13 years now, which is wild to say out loud. But we got together when we were in college. We were about 20 and decided that whatever happened after that, we were going to stay together. So if that meant that he got the first job, then we were going to move wherever his job was or mine or vice versa. And he was in business school and I was in liberal arts. And so you can imagine who got the first job. The business major got the first job, not the history and theology major, as you might imagine.
You never know, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he got a job in New York City. And so we moved there together. We moved to Hoboken, which is right outside New York City, on the Jersey side. And I got a job in commercial real estate. Simply because I started showing up to networking things that he was doing in college because I didn't know where my job was going to come from, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do, but he basically said, there's an event that we need help with. Do you want to come volunteer? And as it turns out, Villanova, our college, has a ton of commercial real estate alumni. And so I ended up, at a dinner table with a whole bunch of older guys who are all in commercial real estate. And there was the whole we'll help you get a job kind of, they all gave me their business cards. And that is how I got my first job. We moved to New Jersey. Chris worked in the city. I worked out in New Jersey. And we did that for a couple of years. Eventually, I transitioned from commercial into residential. And we were planning our wedding. So at this point, we were about 24, 25. And I remember Chris saying to me at one point, do you want to move to Austin? He had been down here to see my aunt and uncle live here. And so we would come down and see my aunt and uncle and cousins. And he just liked the city. And my family's all Texas and Oklahoma. And he was from New Jersey. And so I started to think to myself, am I really going to turn down an opportunity to go closer to my family when that's what he wants? There's a lot of couples where, I would be in a situation of begging him to move out of his home state where we live and move closer to my family, but he wanted that. So it's well, I hate to pass up this opportunity. So we basically just decided to pick up and move to Austin for that reason.
So some of it was the town, but you had some security there. You knew that you had, you'd be close to family. And so it felt a little more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did, live with my aunt and uncle for a couple of months. When we first got here, we probably lived with them for 3 or 4 months before we found a place. So that was a nice soft landing too, for sure.
Yeah. So and in that process, I know that, actually, so did you start working for someone else right off the bat, or did you kind of start your own, your own, you guys call it it's not a practice. What do you call it? You start your own business.
Sometimes people call it a practice. Yeah. Real estate practice. But real estate's funky in the sense of you do work for somebody because you work for a broker, but you're also self-employed, you're 1099, you're an independent contractor under that broker. So the way that Chris and I went was that we joined a brokerage. But we were very independent. So it wasn't like we went on to a team where somebody told us what to do and when to show up and those kinds of things. Like we really did just hang our license with a brokerage, and it's like, welcome to the brokerage, go start your own business now and go find your own clients. And so that's what we did.
So in that process, what are some, and again, I know because I used you as a real estate agent, and I know other people who have. What did it take to like basically start from nothing and build it up to what was, I mean, in those early stages, like what were some of the things that were priorities to you? How did you build it? What was your structure? Did you have a blueprint? Like how did all that work?
It's such a funny question because looking back, sometimes I'm like, I don't know how we did that. I coach women now on my team how to get started. And so I do revisit a lot of those lessons a lot. But honestly, I think a lot of it had to do with being really young and not knowing what we were getting ourselves into. Like I've since then read this idea that entrepreneurs and people who start businesses, one thing that they tend to have in common with one another is an unreasonable level of optimism. Like that everybody else is like, that's not going to work. It's never going to work for all these reasons. It's really going to suck. And all the entrepreneurs out there are like, it'll be fine. And it's kind of like they're both right? Because the people who are saying this is going to be harder than you think it is, they're right. But the people starting the business who are like, it'll be fine, they're also right. It just kind of depends on when and if you quit.
Right. Which one is going to motivate you to actually to see it through? You said something a minute ago about like, and I don't remember your exact words, but it was like, I don't remember exactly how all this happened, or like, I don't know how we got here. Like looking back now, what do you think was like other than the optimism, what is it that like was critical to keeping you moving forward? And, do you think about any of that now?
Yeah, I absolutely do think about it. And this is going to be a really weird answer, but I think I'm unemployable. So like
Interesting. I need to hear that. Yeah.
So I honestly think that's what kept me going, because anytime that I started to think this is so hard, or that rejection was so painful, or, this money situation that we're in is so scary, like anytime any of those thoughts started to occur to me, and occasionally I would think that, well, I mean, should I just go get a real job? And I would think about what it would be like to show up somewhere, to have somebody tell me how many vacation days I have, and to have somebody tell me how I'm supposed to do things. That idea scared me so much. It was scarier than all of the scary things about being self-employed. It was scarier than being in massive amounts of debt.
That's fascinating
to me.
Yeah.
It was scarier than picking up the phone and cold calling and getting hung up on. It was scarier than making all those my own decisions and owning them and owning the consequences of them. But the idea of being tied to like a mean boss, it scared the living daylights out of me.
That's so fascinating. I've been thinking a lot about fear lately. In fact, I listened to a book recently from a guy named Anthony DeMello. It was called Awareness. It was recommended to me from a friend. And he brought about these points about how the opposite of love is fear. And I've spent a lot of time in contemplation about what fear, and then I do think about, I think about all the decisions that I've made in my life, good or bad or indifferent, and about how a lot of them were based in fear, of being afraid of some sort of consequence. And hearing you say that, it's interesting, because in my mind, a lot of people listening, or some people studying, even if they studied your path, they would think, oh no, like she did this because she had a vision and she was a go-getter. And not that you're not, but I love hearing you say, and I was afraid. I was afraid of the consequences of not being able to do that. And I think it's powerful to be able to say and to share with people, anybody who's you're mentoring or telling about your story.
Yeah. And it's important to me to share stuff like that, because I think and I've thought to myself, why do I care? Like, why do I care about sharing these things? Is it just, do I like to be on film and I like to be seen? What is it? Or do I care about what is it that I believe other people will get from this? Or why do I want this out there in the world, this kind of thing, this kind of like honesty, I guess I would call it. And like the real version of the story. And I think part of it for me comes down to who are some of the people that I look around at and I hear their stories and I'm inspired by the honesty. And it's not the stories of like, I just worked really hard and I gave it my all. Like, okay, that's great, but that doesn't inspire me that much. Cause I kind of don't believe them, cause it's like, there's more to that story than just like, you were just more committed than everyone else. Like there's a realer version of that story. So I think it's important for people to hear, if anyone looks at me and thinks that they see success, which what does that even mean, right? But if anyone ever thinks that, I want to be able to tell them, look, I was scared. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a perfect vision. I had no idea I was going to be here in what year is it? 2021, almost 2022. Like I didn't know that I would have this team and it would look this way. People ask me that sometimes. What was your vision when you started to build a team? I'm like, I didn't have one. I was tired of working so hard.
Yeah, I needed help.
Like that's it, right? And so I do think that there's something powerful, especially for other women. I think a lot of other women tend to feel very afraid of taking risks in a lot of ways, right? In some ways, we're conditioned in a different way than men are to worry about, well, but what if it's not perfect? And what if it doesn't work out? What will people think? And I think it's important for women to hear from other women. Like, I wasn't sure. I didn't know how it was going to work. And there were definitely failures along the way, for sure.
Yeah. I guess when you say that women are conditioned to be afraid of failure and things like that. My first thought is I'm wondering like, oh, is that true? And then why? Well, what do you have any insight on that, or have you studied that at all, or what even makes you say it?
Well, I mean, there's some raw data out there that makes me believe it. And just one thing that's very well documented would be women on average get paid less than men. And one of the very simple reasons for that is that women are less likely to ask for raises and they're less likely to negotiate when they're starting a job. So a woman right out of college is less likely when someone says, we'll give you $40,000 a year, she's less likely to counter them. She'll accept it. Whereas her male counterpart is much more likely to negotiate and start at 50. Right. And so then that reverberates throughout your entire life.
Sure.
So just a couple of simple things like that I've observed. And then I've wondered to myself, why is that?
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you explain that?
I don't know. I mean, maybe the simple explanation is that parents tend to treat male children differently than female children. I mean, we're rewarded for different things. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, because being a father of two daughters, I think about like, what can I do as a parent, as a father, as a mentor, any way that if I'm in charge of, and in fact, my entire staff is almost all women. I have two other males that I work with. So if I'm leading, guiding, women who, of course, my deepest desire for all people is to become their most powerful self, their highest level of self, whatever that means for them, not for what I want that to be. But I guess I'm just trying to contemplate that concept and think like, well, how can I contribute to helping someone not to feel that way? And I guess truly it's a feeling, right? It's like it's something you impose on yourself. Like maybe you were culturally brought up that way, but ultimately it's almost like a choice, almost like a feeling that that people have about themselves.
Yeah. I'm always hesitant to think of it as like, well, this is the way that things are. And we have this data that says it. And therefore, now we're all victims of it, right? That's not the way that I tend to think about things. I do tend to believe that we all have our things to work on and every individual is different. And we do, to a certain extent, have the ability to shape our own lives. I don't know if I believe that we have 100% ability to shape our own lives. Like we don't get to control who we were born to and where and
sure,
what kind of traumas we had and whatever. Like we don't have complete control, but we always have, you talk about this, we always have, or maybe it wasn't you that talked about this, responsibility, being the ability to respond.
Right. Yeah, I've talked about. I mean, okay. I've talked about it on this show in past episodes, and it's something that I talk about all the time. Really, is like there's reaction and response, and we get to choose a lot of that. And then when the level of awareness that's in, because I do think this is a piece of what we're talking about. Is like, if as a woman, you as a woman are aware of this being a thing, an issue, and so now with that awareness, you have the ability to choose. Like, oh, I'm going to do something different than that. Because when I think about you, and in fact, why you're on this show and everything else is like, I find nothing meek about you. I don't find anything I find you to be a really powerful person, like someone like you mentioned, like asking for a raise and being negotiating and stuff like that. And I know that's a part of your normal everyday work, being a real estate agent. But I also remember when you were on the speaking tour, and I remember having a conversation with you. It was like, I'm going to ask for this amount of money to do speaking, and it was like. And I was blown away by that, because I was like, I don't even have, like, I don't have that kind of balls to say this is what I'm worth, and I'm not going to take anything less than that. And I thought, and I was just inspired by it. I thought it was powerful. I wanted to emulate that in my life, and and so I guess I'm saying all that to say is like, well, what do you do differently? Like, what knowing those things, how do you choose differently?
Yeah. And on the whole speaking, getting paid to speak thing, that is something that was, I was very close to starting to negotiate some of those. And then COVID happened. So I will report. Yeah. I will report back after I've had a chance to actually get myself into a couple of those negotiations. But it was absolutely a learned skill for me. I know that at my core, I struggle with perfectionism. I struggle with people pleasing, right? Those are all things that I struggle with, which then translates into your sense of worth. And, well, am I really worth being paid that if I'm not perfect? And what are people going to say if I ask for more? And those were all things that I had to overcome by doing. I mean, went back to that whole, like, what was I struggling through when I was afraid to fail? I was struggling through getting hung up on and picking the phone back up and making another phone call, or dealing with a client or a potential client who was super upset about something and maybe thought it was my fault, or I was afraid they thought it was my fault. And can I deal with other people's big emotions without taking it on myself? And what if I messed it up and didn't do it perfectly? If I wasn't afraid of the alternative, I would have run from that stuff so fast.
Well, so having been one of your clients multiple times, one of the things, now I'm thinking about this, is all kind of coming together for me a little bit, is like one of the reasons why I recommend you to whomever is looking for a real estate agent, all that stuff, is because of the level of detail that you take in your work. And now I'm listening to, and because I'm like this too, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I'm wondering do you feel like you're so detailed? And you're almost, because it's like an insecurity thing, like the perfectionism that you just talked about and your work ethic and all that other stuff. Do you feel like it comes from a place of lacking more as much as it does a place of like competence?
100%. And this is something that I've thought about a lot recently, because I've had all kinds of struggles as a new mom, like the way that some of this stuff that I've worked through emotionally with work has now come up in motherhood, right? And so you go, oh, I already learned these things over here, but now I have to learn them over here. It feels brand new until you realize, oh, I've been here before. It's just, I'm in a new environment, right? But I think that all of our greatest weaknesses and our biggest demons are usually also our greatest strengths.
Right. Yeah. I went to and I've talked about this on this show, but I went to a forum where they talked about how we put on these things called strong suits. And these strong suits are born really out of like something that happened to us that was kind of a negative experience, generally like when you were younger than 13 or something like that. And so if I got made fun of, for example, on the playground, I might then take on like being the class clown because I just went along with it. And then all of a sudden my humor becomes a strong suit, but it really came from a place of fear, and so I think I have this, I'm a people pleaser, like you. I tend to have perfectionism tendencies and things like that. And so, but those are all born out of a place of not strength, that's me trying to overcome something that I'm not happy about myself. And it sounds like you can relate to that.
Oh, I can 100% relate to that. Yeah. Okay.
So, taking all of that, so going back to so you lead a team of women. So you were mentioning that, and I think it's called The Wire. Is that, yeah. So The Wire, and I didn't realize you were all women, but now that I realize, I've seen all your marketing, it's only women in it.
Yeah. And Wire is actually short for Women in Real Estate.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So it was by choice, clearly. Uh-huh. And,
actually that's interesting, because not really.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me that.
So my first hire was a woman, and, maybe I should say hire, maybe I should say partnership, because they're all technically independent contractors. But I added a woman to the team, and I had been working with Emma for years and years. So Emma was the first woman I worked with, and then we added Morgan. And so then along the way, women kept joining me. And that wasn't necessarily by design, but I found that I liked working with women. And then we had this culture of all women. And so then it was like, okay, well, I guess I could hire a man, but do we really want to? I mean, maybe there'll be a good fit someday, but right now we've got this all female thing going on. It's working for us. And I remember it was probably like April or May, probably May of 2020. So this was COVID, early COVID. This was, the Tiger King days of COVID, right?
Yeah. It's an awesome description of it. Yes.
And I was newly pregnant, and I was having some like early pregnancy insomnia, which prior to having a baby, I never suffered from insomnia. I would hit the pillow and I'd be out, but that's a whole other story. So I'm laying there and I'm not sleeping, which is a weird experience for me. And I'm staring at the ceiling and I'm thinking to myself, if I were to ever start my own brokerage, like if I wanted to really start a brand, what would it be like? And what would I name it? Like, I don't want to be the Affinito team. I've never wanted to do that whole thing. Like, there's plenty of real estate teams that do that, and that's great, but it never really did it for me. And at the time I had like a placeholder name that I'd used for a few years that I didn't really like that much, didn't do that much for me. And so I started having this crazy like vision that just turned into a whole like, wacky business plan. And I was thinking to myself, what if you had this really cool office space that was like a co-working space, but also a cafe. And it's like allowing people in real estate to mingle with the public. Because one of the things I don't understand is that in real estate, the thing that you want to talk to people. Like you want to mingle with the public as much as possible. And then in real estate, we build these offices that the public would never walk into unless they have an appointment, right? So why doesn't every real estate brokerage run like coffee shop offices?
Brilliant. And honestly, and also a big part of real estate is networking. Getting yourself out there is, so it seems to be like a perfect idea.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there thinking about it and I'm envisioning this cool office space because this is the kind of thing I do when I'm laying awake at night, right? So I'm like imagining this super cool office space and I'm starting to imagine that for some reason in my head, it's like all women. And then I'm like, it's like a female entrepreneur incubator for like women in small business, but it's also a real estate office and it's also a coffee shop and it's so cool. And the interior has all these beautiful flowers and it's a cool and inviting place to hang out. And as I'm imagining all this, and then I'm like, we would have events once a month and we would do like, there'd be like an aerial yoga event one month. And then another month it would be like, build your own terrarium with like, succulents and stuff. So I'm like imagining all these crazy events. And in my head, like this idea comes to me, women in real estate, wire. It just comes to me as I'm sitting here thinking about this.
Isn't it amazing how things like that happen?
Yeah. So that's my crazy vision for an office someday. Maybe it'll play out. Maybe it won't. I have no idea. But that's I don't know. That's my thing.
Yeah. So I have so many questions about that. But so now that you have this office, this team that you work with, knowing the things that you know about the challenges of being a woman in business or a woman in life, and which obviously goes into business, is there a part of like your development or is there a part of your leadership of them that really that strives to counter some of that? Or like, does it play in at all? Is it even something you guys talk about?
Yeah, it definitely plays in. And this actually circles back around to your question about as you're leading a lot of women, what can you be doing? What can you be doing with this information? Cool. So I was actually thinking about that after you said that. I think something that I do for my own team that I think is very important is that a big part of my value proposition of my women is mentorship. So that if they join this team, they will get a lot of one-on-one time working through their issues. So basically, I am here to help them achieve their own visions of success. So similar to what you said, I'm not here to tell them what their goals should be. I want to create an environment where they feel safe dreaming big and where they feel safe really figuring out what they want, and then I will help them go get it. And so what I have found is that the more specific we can get, the better. So it's easy to kind of go up here and be thinking broadly about like, how do we fix this huge systemic issue? When really the question is, what happened this week? that we can work on together.
Where can you find power in your day-to-day life?
Right. So we do a lot of like weekly mentoring and weekly calls where we're diving into, okay, here's the thing that you said you want. Here's how you tried to get it this week. Here's what got in your way. And then we dive super deep into that specific situation.
Right.
And there's usually a lot of growth that comes out of that because we are able to then find that place where there's a limiting belief, where there's a fear, an unexpressed fear or something going on. And the reason that I'm so passionate about that is because I know my own experience of receiving coaching and mentoring that really sort of dismantled a lot of that stuff for me was so powerful. And so now I'm excited to get to help other women do that for themselves.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned mentorship. It's actually been coming up in a lot of my conversations lately. Number one, successful people, they directly attribute a lot of their success to some mentor, someone who taught them the way. And it's also been coming up a lot in conversations where it seems like maybe there aren't a lot of mentors. It's like, I don't know. It's like, it feels like there's not a lot of mentors out there, or it's not as commonplace as it. And now I'm keeping in mind, I'm talking to mostly entrepreneurs and people who work for themselves. And so like maybe in an organization, there's a little bit more mentorship, but I can say from the military side of things, which I'm still in the military, it used to be a big part of our culture was like counseling and leadership. And I'm feeling like it's kind of like dying or fading away or something. Do you feel that way? I mean, obviously you just said you incorporate it in your work, but I know you've received coaching from and mentoring from other people. Is that something you still feel prevalent? Is it something you still seek out? How is all that?
Yeah, so I still do a good amount of coaching with the person who I refer to as my mentor. And so, I mean, I will say from the beginning, I paid for it. I paid for it formally as coaching. So there's a huge coaching industry. So there are people out there who are willing. I mean, if somebody's looking for a mentor who's going to teach them how to be successful and give them their all for nothing in return, you're not going to find it, right?
Right. But it's rare.
But yeah, where it's rare, exactly. But at least if you're in a money making industry like real estate, you're going to be paying for good mentorship, probably.
And I think you should. I think I'm big on like having skin in the game.
Sure.
Are you going to be as likely to follow through on some of this input and advice if it's something that's kind of just come cheap?
And a good mentor is going to push you to do things that make you feel like you're going to die.
Scary.
They're going to push you to do very, very scary things. And so there has to be a level of trust and there has to be a level of buy-in, because you can get advice from people all day long, but are you really going to do that thing that makes you feel terrified if you don't have somebody behind you, Yeah,
it goes back to that fear thing. And as you know, because you've done scary things in life and career, often you suffer more. There's even a quote by someone famous. I'm going to paraphrase it. I don't remember who said it, but we suffer more in our minds than we do in actuality. And I think it's so powerful to have people in your life who are kind of pushing you to face those fears, to do that thing that you're afraid of, to realize that like, this shit isn't that hard. It's really not that hard. We make it hard up here, but in actuality, we really can and are far more powerful than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's true. And also one more thing on the mentor point that I would throw out there is that I think a mentor is not always going to show up with mentor tattooed across their forehead. Right. And a lot of times if you're a business owner, particularly, I would think about your investors and some of the people that you're already partnered with. Because if you have anybody in your life who, particularly if they are older than you, they've had several decades more in the industry than you have, especially people once people start to hit their 50s and 60s, they're less interested, in my experience, they're less interested in making another buck and they're more interested in impact. So if you've got somebody in your investor pool or something who you feel like, okay, yeah, they've put money in and, I'm kind of mostly delivering what I told them I would, but something feels a little off. Maybe what you're not giving them is an opportunity to mentor you, because that might be what they want. Maybe they don't just want to exchange money with you.
Yeah. And that's why I mentioned when you said you are likely going to have to pay some of these people, which I do think is true. And I do think there's value in that. I also think that it's likely that you would find somebody who has this level of wisdom, this level of experience and knowledge, who literally just wants to contribute to, who it's a gift to them. Like I can say for myself, when someone asks me for help, when someone asks me for advice, I'm so grateful for it. I mean, it gives me an opportunity. It gives me a gift to do what I love doing. And I've spent all this time doing this shit. Like I want to like give it, and I know there's other people out there who are like that.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's true. And I think that you're more likely to find that if you look close, right? So if you start thinking to yourself, for example, like, oh, I love Brene Brown or Mel Robbins, I wonder if they'll mentor me. The answer is probably no.
Because there's a crowd of people who are asking
right.
them, probably.
That person is famous. They have, in a lot of senses, arrived. They're up on this pedestal. But if you stop thinking that way, like, can I get Tim Ferriss or somebody to mentor me, and start thinking instead, who do I, like, let me think about 25 people I know who are successful, who I know. Either they own my gym, or I have partnered with them in the small business thing, or they, whatever. Like if you can think that close to home, then you probably will find somebody who's willing to work with you for free or less, or because it brings them joy.
It's funny you say that, because now I'm thinking about, why did I start this podcast? And I have all these interesting conversations with people who I know and love in my life. And I've had these great conversations like not being recorded before. And I thought, well, I gained so much from that. I got some wisdom from that. It was like a little gift. It was a little nugget that like moved me forward. And I really think that's why I sought out to have these conversations to, one, help myself grow, because I'm learning from you right now in this moment. I'm being educated by you. And then also to be able to share that with other people. And so all I did to get guests on this show was I write down 25 successful people who I feel like out there doing something awesome, or they have something to say. So I think that's exactly, people will want to talk to you, those 25 people on your list or whatever. So I think that's a great tip for anyone who maybe doesn't want to have a podcast, but they just want to have the conversation.
Right. 100%. And I actually know a woman who has done a lot of mentoring. She's in her probably late 40s now. I'm not sure exactly how old she is, but she's been very successful in business, and has risen through, into kind of C-level type of positions. And she does a lot of mentoring and does not get paid for it. So back to your point, it's not true that you're always gonna have to pay for it. But what she has said to me is that the best thing you can ever do to repay your mentor is do what they told you to do. So yeah. if you come to them for advice, you say, I have a problem and I want to know how to fix it. And you tell them exactly what they need to do to fix it, and they don't act on that, and then they call you back in a week or two, she's like, there's nothing more frustrating.
So frustrating.
So back to the title of your podcast, do the work.
That's good. And there's no other secret. The reason why I named the podcast that, and why it's one of my values, my personal values, and that I've extended to the gym, is there is no replacement for just getting out there and muddling your way through it, however ugly, however imperfect, having a work ethic, being willing to work hard, and then having a great attitude about it, because you know that work is going to serve you. There's no replacement. You can't learn it in a book. No one can. And again, the mentor can only tell it to you. But if you don't do the shit, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't work.
Right. Absolutely.
So this show mostly is about optimal health, deep human connection, and self-actualization. It's what I really like. I'm trying to, and we've already talked a lot about that. But what of those three things is something that maybe you're working on, or a place where you have some strength, or optimal health, deep human connection, self-actualization? Do any of those resonate with you?
They all sound great, Athan. I don't.
I'd like yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, do I have anything to offer on any of those?
Well, what does deep human connection look like for you right now? And where are you doing that work, or where are you struggling? I'd love to just kind of hear about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the places where I'm really seeing it are with my baby. So he's 11 months old now.
Yeah.
He's going to be
awesome.
He's going to be a year soon. And so, just growing into that relationship with him and watching him change so rapidly has been one of the most amazing, most vulnerable, most difficult, most beautiful things I've ever done. And I feel like, not to get all wild on y'all, but it feels like having a baby broke my heart open.
Wow. That's so, it's beautiful. And you were talking earlier, which was something I meant to ask about, and it perfectly came full circle just now. The level of vulnerability and like almost literal shit that you have to deal with and like be honest about. One, all parents have to deal with that, but I've witnessed you deal with it somewhat publicly with with tons of grace, you know, and one, I think there's a level of brilliance to that. But two, it's just something I really deeply appreciate because not enough people are willing to, you know, there's so many people out there who are your quote unquote influencers who try to make them how perfect their life is and how amazing of a mother they are. And you are an amazing mother, but you have the strategy of honesty and transparency and vulnerability with that, which has just been just beautiful to watch.
And thank you. That means a lot to me. And I think that kind of circling back to what I was saying earlier, I think that the reason that I feel comfortable doing that is because I'm putting out what I wish I had seen more of.
Yeah.
You know, motherhood really took me by surprise in a lot of ways, which I know it does for a lot of people. But it was harder in so many ways than I expected. I've wanted to be a mother my whole life. I always knew that I wanted children. So there was never a doubt in my mind that I wanted to be a mother. And so then when it was so hard and when it took me by surprise in so many ways, and when there were moments where I was like, I thought this was supposed to be beautiful and wonderful, and I kind of don't like it right now. You know, I was like, I wish that I didn't feel so much shame about this. And as I spoke to other new moms, you know, and I would reach out and be like, what's going on with this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's a thing. And I'm like, well, then why aren't we talking about this? Like, what is the deal? Right?
Yeah. Well, that word shame that you just said is powerful for a lot of people. Cause again, because they all said that's a thing and they probably all had a similar reaction. It's like, we hide the dark parts of ourselves. We cover it, we mask it. We try to do anything to not let people see that part of us. And I think that's where we become chained. You know, there's a level of slavery that we put ourselves in that no one else has to do to us. No, you know, we enslave ourselves. We chain ourselves through that hiding that, you know, it goes back to Adam and Eve. It's as old as that, you know? And so I love that you're breaking those chains. And again, that's one of the things that I'm not as I want to be more courageous about like exposing some of the clutteredness of my life, the dirtiness of my life. And I'm curious, did you do it? Have you? And so for the audience who maybe you should follow Isabel for sure, and maybe we'll get to the end about like where they can follow you and all this other stuff. But on your social media, your Instagram, your Facebook and stuff like that, you do these like little clips and you'll do videos and like talk openly about the challenges that you're going with, or you'll be doing like some of my favorite ones, like you'll be talking about business, like just talking about work, and Tony will crawl in or something will happen in the background or whatever. And it's just like, and it's like unfazed. You're just doing your work. And so those are some of the most inspiring moments for me. And I'm just curious about the thinking that goes behind that.
Yeah, I wish like I had a strategy, but I mean, I would say some of the really vulnerable stuff that I've put out, which was particularly like early postpartum, when frankly I was just a little off my rocker.
Sure, like, which you admitted in those videos.
Yeah. But you know, the hormones and sleep deprivation, everything else, like it's a thing, right? But I do think that like part of it for me is selfish in a sense of like, I think for me it's kind of a way to exercise some of my own demons.
Yeah, healing.
It's healing. It's like some people talk about, you know, they take whatever it is and they put it into art. You know, they paint something or they make music and then they release it. And for me, sharing it kind of releases it for me.
That's your art. Yeah. I can say that I'm sure that anyone who sees it, who has seen it, you've helped them to move forward with doing something similar. You know, or at least given them that level of awareness. Like even if they're still afraid to do something like that, I think it like has shown a model of it, which we need more, you know, people out there being good role models for the rest of us. So,
well, thank you. That feels really amazing because I don't know that I had anything as wonderful as that intention for it, you know? But sometimes things like that. I don't know how to put the words on it about the way that makes me feel.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, I get that. You mentioned it being somewhat selfish on your part, but I think that's how a lot of like beautiful, like I think I try to encourage more people to do more things that are purely selfish for them. Like to be your best self. Like stop giving a fuck about what I want you to do. I had a coaching conversation with one of my coaches the other day. We were doing our evaluations right now. And I was like, no, don't try to do it like this other coach. Like, don't try to do it how you think I would do it. Like the most proud of you when you're on fire being your best self, so be a little selfish, be a little self-centered, like put yourself on the stage. And so I do think a lot of beautiful things and a lot of lessons are taught when people are just really unchained like that. So
yeah, I think so too. And I think selfishness is an interesting concept because we have such a negative stigma around it.
Yeah.
Right. Like we almost always use it when someone has done something that hurts other people and we see to benefit them. Right. And I think that that's starting to change. You hear more and more people talking about the positive side of selfishness and, self-care and do something for yourself. We're seeing more kind of healthy conversation around that. But I'm not personally somebody who believes that if everybody just did what they wanted, that would be a bad thing, or that people fundamentally want to do harm and that they only don't because of the punishments and incentives that we've put in place.
Sure.
Like I actually do think that people do bad things sometimes. But I think that fundamentally people do want connection. They do want love. They do want to make an impact. They do want to make a difference. So yeah, I absolutely think that people should do more of what they want. Because what I've noticed with coaching people is that very often when that impulse to take care of yourself is too repressed, it comes out in weird other ways that you don't intend.
Yeah. I mean, just any level of filtering ourselves, dimming ourselves down or something like that absolutely is going to, it goes back to that fear thing I said earlier when you just mentioned it a second ago. Like, yeah, people do bad and horrible things, somewhat intentionally. But if you get to the horrible things that I've done, if I really drill down to the base of it, it was almost always born in fear. I did that thing because I was afraid of something else, and which is the opposite of love. Like I wasn't loving myself. I wasn't being accepting and loving of another person or whatever. And so I did this horrific thing, So I think that we see that a lot. I think that when we were talking about selfishness, a couple things that it's important to say is like, you said something like, you did something selfish and it hurt somebody or something like that. But most of the time it's when you said hurt, we're talking about probably emotionally or psychologically or something, but we hurt ourselves through what other people do. Like I can't say a word to you. I can't make an action and act, really hurt you. Most of the time I hurt myself by what you said or what you did. And I think that a lot of people give other people too much credit around that selfishness. And then also around selfishness, it's like as if I don't have like to do something for myself, as if I don't have the right to try to be like add value, to be my best self. Like it's like other people have this like insecurity. I could see a lot of people around you having a lot of insecurity because you might make them feel a little like intimidated. Like they might feel like, man, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not successful, or I'm not
always,
whatever.
For some reason, I've always found that hilarious because, I'm a very small person.
Well, in stature. Yes.
Right,
yeah.
so
But I don't see you as I don't make you small in my mind. Like, I see you as a powerful person.
I've heard it for so many years that I've just accepted that it must be true. But it's hard for me to process because I'm like, I am a woman. I am 5'3". I think of myself also as being a people pleaser and being very worried what other people think. And so the fact that anybody ever is afraid of me or intimidated of me or anything like that, I'm just like, oh, okay.
I get the same thing because I'm all the time trying to be nice. That if anyone ever says I'm intimidating to them, I'm like, whoa, like it's never what I'm going for. But yeah. So we kind of got off on that we were talking about like the deep human connection and like your connection with your son. And how do you, so then thinking about leveraging you were talking about parenthood earlier and like how it's been challenging with your career, and like how have you made all that work, and like how does that, now being a new parent, things look very different day to day for you. So like how does that work for you?
Yes, indeed. Work in progress, but I do feel like I'm in a nice little equilibrium right now, which who knows what's going to change, right? But you got to celebrate those moments when you find them. A couple of things that were just I guess a few things that I've learned over the last couple of months. Number one is I like certainty and I like control. And I've had to release some of that because I realize now that those things are either they're in smaller quantities when you have a child, or it was always a delusion and now it's just shattered. I'm not sure which one of those two it is, but
probably the latter.
Yeah. Yeah. But with a babies change so much. Like it's starting to slow down now as he gets older, but in those early weeks, it'd be like, okay, cool. I figured it out. This is what we got to do now. And the next week it's different.
Right.
And so you just have to like let go of that. So one thing that I had to really accept is that what I need in terms of help from Chris, my husband, what I need in terms of childcare, how many hours of childcare I want, like all that stuff, I had to be okay with it being one way this week and a different way next week. And just getting really honest with myself about like, what do I need? What do I want? And what are my hangups? So I had to realize for myself that I had this bizarre idea in my head that I could be running a full-time business at this really high level and also be super mom. And I was trying to do it all. And at a certain point I had to be like, okay, if I'm going to run a full-time business, I need full-time childcare, and I should not feel guilty, or I have to get over whatever crap I have about feeling inadequate because I need 50 hours of childcare a week.
Right.
And that was really a hurdle for me.
Yeah. And that's huge. And what you said is reminds me of the. Have you read the book Essentialism?
I think I started it once.
I love that book. There's only a few books out there that have like really fundamentally changed like how I do it. Most of the time you read a book and you like forget it and don't change, or at least you don't change anything.
Who wrote Essentialism?
I can't remember now.
Okay.
I remember it's a white cover and it's got little scribblies on it. But I've been doing, by the way, and this for everybody out there, I'm doing a bibliography. So anytime we talk about a book or we talk about anything, I'll kind of I'll share it for everybody. But anyway, one of the things he says in there is that you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And that has really stuck with me about choices. Like I can be a dad. I can be a business owner. But I can't do like 3 other things and be really high level at them on top of that. And then I think I listened to a guy on a podcast, and I can't remember right now, but he also said it's like really you got to pick 2 or 3 things in your life that you're going to do at a really high level. And it's just all about choices. You don't have enough time or energy to be good at anything else. So it sounds like you've kind of like had to make some of those choices for yourself and make some decisions. And
yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I did that I think went really well actually was I set up a maternity leave for myself very consciously. So I spent from the time that I got pregnant through really mid-December. So sometime in mid-December of 2020, I was completely off. And I spent a good portion of that year. So from the time I got pregnant in like April through when I delivered him in January, was really focused on how do I set my team up so that if I disappear for 2 months, my team will be fine. No phone calls, no emails, no nothing.
Brilliant.
And that was one of the biggest challenges that I've ever taken on. Nothing like having a baby, but it was certainly a challenge. And I was really proud of the result because we did it. Like, I was able to hand my business over to the women on my team, completely disappear for 6 full weeks, and everything was fine.
Yeah, there's no replacement for again, like we practice worst case scenarios. There's no like that's why we have fire drills and we have things like that. In the military, we do rehearsals before every single training operation, before every mission. You do tons of rehearsals so that you've like practiced what, you kind of think through contingencies and like, oh, I thought on paper this would sounded good, but in actuality it didn't. And like credit to you for having the wherewithal to kind of do some of that as a part of becoming a mother. not knowing what becoming a mother would be like.
And I'm so glad that I did, because then, the sleep deprivation was very real after he was born. And I not only struggled with like him being awake a lot because he's an infant, but I also had this sort of like anxiety reaction after he was born that led to a lot of insomnia. So even when he would sleep for 4 or 5 hours at a time, I couldn't sleep sometimes. And so I wasn't in any shape to be helping people make real estate decisions or to be emotionally even keeled and be on the phone with people. Like, I've spoken to real estate agents, women who are like, oh yeah, I was answering emails from the delivery room.
Insane.
And I get it, because I can see myself doing that, but I made a very conscious choice not to. And I'm glad that I did, because it would not have been good for my clients, and it was good for the growth of the women on my team to pick all that stuff up too. They learned a ton.
It's a gift to them.
Absolutely.
A lot of times we feel like we're dumping things, we're burdening, when you're asking for help or when you're trying to, take on a situation like yours. But a lot of times most people feel like, oh, this is an opportunity. They feel good. It feels good to ask someone to say like, oh, you can handle this. You're competent. You're able.
And it's also amazing how much more capable people are when, as a leader, you say, I'm handing you the ball and I'm stepping out, and you mean it. Right? If they think that you're going to hop back in on that text chain or whatever with the client in 20 minutes, then they're going to behave very differently than if they believe you when you say that you're out. Right.
No, that's huge. And I've always thought about leadership in that way. For me, what leadership means is that I give you all the resources, I give you all the support, I give you all the education, I give you whatever you need for you to do it on your own, and like me just get out of the way. I'm successful when you have taken the ball and run with it. If I'm constantly having to get in the middle of it, then it's really a lack. I don't look at it as a lacking as the other. It's a lacking of me, that I haven't done a right enough job by you to let you do the work without me.
Yeah. Have you read Turn the Ship Around is what it's called?
No.
So it was written by a Navy, I don't know, commander. What do they call the guy who
Admiral,
runs the ship?
Yeah, I think they're usually an admiral.
Okay. Guess an admiral. So it was written by one of those guys. And he talks about taking one of the lowest performing ships in the Navy and turning it into one of the best performing ships in the Navy. And he tells that whole story of how he did that. And I appreciate it, because it's not one of those, I did it because I'm great. It's here's exactly how I did it, and here's the challenges we had, and here's what drove me to do it, and all those kinds of things. But one of the things that he talks about in that book that has really resonated with me as a leader is that, he talks about how in the Navy, sometimes people have this ego about, oh, well, this ship ran so well, and then the day I left, everything fell apart. And that just shows how great I am.
Yeah, we've heard these stories. Versus
the idea of, I got this ship to a point where I walked away and everything kept running smoothly.
That's awesome.
And that was his goal.
It reminds me of the book called Clockwork by Michael. Have you read that? Michael Michalowicz, I'm saying his name. But same thing, where like the whole goal that he tries to teach you through that lesson is that you could walk away from your business for 4 weeks and it runs exactly as how it did when you were there. And I think that's that's the real test, and that's the real testament to your leadership and your legacy, and is that you can step in and out as needed, and it runs the same either way.
Yeah. And one thing I will say too about getting ready for that maternity leave is that I really started getting ready years before, if I think about it, because where I started getting ready was when I started taking 1 day off a week.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that was probably 5 years ago that I claimed Friday as my day, and the Friday is still my day off. And it's really interesting to me, like the number of small business owners. It's not interesting because I know I did it, right? But the number of small business owners who don't take a day off. And that was me for years.
I still don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when you did that. I just remember being aware that you did that. I don't remember when you started it, but, and I thought.
I probably told you in our first client consultation. I was like, by the way, I'm off on Fridays.
If you contact me on Fridays, Emma will reach, it'll be someone else who maybe, but I'm off on Fridays, which I thought, good for you. Right off the bat, you're setting boundaries, you're setting constraints, you're setting expectations. And I think that's huge, because the other side of that is what I live a lot of the time is like always being on, always being available. Setting the expectation is that, if someone texts you, you're going to respond back no matter when or what time or what day. And that's why I think that's why most businesses don't last more than 5 years. And, there's more stories of failure in small business ownership than there are of success.
Sure. And that comes back around to that whole thing we were talking about selfishness and self-care. And, that's something that I coach women on a lot. And I've done it both inside and outside my business, coached women about, and people in general, about how to take a day off. And they go through all the fears and everything that I did myself. Well, what if I lose business? What if an emergency happens and someone needs me and I'm not there?
It's that fear thing.
It's the whole fear thing, right? And I think what I tell people, they're like, oh, I'm going to take a big vacation at the end of the year. I'm just going to work really hard until I take my big vacation at the end of the year. I'm like, listen, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but if you can't take one day off, you can't take 10 days off. You got to start.
And are you going to enjoy that vacation? Like maybe you will take those 10 days off, but are you going to be freaking out?
Right. I did that to myself once. So I know exactly what that feels like. And the analogy that I use is it's like trying to catch up on weeks worth of no sleep by sleeping all day for like 4 days straight.
Yeah.
Your body can't do it. Right. It doesn't work that way. Right. You need that cycle of stress and rest.
Yeah. Well, you need consistency.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whatever we do consistently is what stays
right.
with us. It's like the spurts and going hard on your rest or going hard on your work isn't going to be sustainable in the long run.
Right. And it's like, if you have set up this, and this is something that small business owners do to ourselves because we work so hard a lot of times, right? And then we're like, we want this big reward. When that deal closes, I'm going to go to Mexico for 2 weeks and I'm going to do nothing, or whatever the vision is, right? But the problem is, and anyone who's considering this can take it from me. The problem with that is that now you've given that trip to Mexico such a huge job that it can never possibly live up to it. If it's supposed to make up for the last 2 years of you grinding, you're going to wake up every morning and be like, what am I going to do today to have so much fun that it's going to be worth it?
Right. And nothing's
going to do that for you.
And we do that in so many aspects of our life. Honestly, it's like that next hire is going to be what changes my life, or this next relationship, or when I have kids, or
for me right now, when I lose the weight. I hear myself saying this all the time.
Right. And we do this and again, we put these concepts and ideas on a pedestal as if that was what was to blame for us, our lives not being good and great and amazing, like right now in the moment. And it's kind of like a powerless position in a lot of ways. You're giving way more power to a concept or idea than your actual habits or actions or way of being. Well, since you mentioned it, your health, again, the show is about optimal health. It's something that I am constantly, what I deeply desire for all people in my life. It's what I want to contribute to and what I want for myself, which I'm also struggling right now. But what's health look like as a business owner? What does it look like as a new mother? What is it looking like for you these days? I've had the wonderful opportunity to be your coach for many years, and I'm sad that I'm not anymore. But I am curious about what it's like for you now.
Yeah, so I'm on a pretty good kick recently, so I'm excited about that. Postpartum is its very own thing. And so for me, it's been, especially when it comes to health and fitness, it's been trying to find this balance between giving myself grace, being like, I am recovering from something major. I'm in a very different place in my life. Giving myself that grace, and at the same time, not making excuses. Oh, well, I can't do this because I'm postpartum. Like, I also don't want to put that on Tony, right? I don't want to saddle him with all these, how many moms do you hear say, well, I lost my body after my babies and I never got it back. Like, I don't want to do that to my children, right? Like, it's possible that my body will never be the same.
Right.
That's possible, but it's not their fault.
But it's not the kid's fault, yeah.
Right, it's not their fault. And so I've been trying to find that balance, and it looked different at 2 weeks postpartum, and then 3 months postpartum, and then now I'm on a pretty good kick now, and I feel like I'm finally at this place where I'm not likely to hurt myself. So there for a while.
You mean physically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there for a while, like I remember getting on a pretty good, I just posted a video about this the other day, actually.
I don't think I saw it.
Yeah, it was like yesterday, day before. I don't remember what day. It might have been yesterday. But for a couple of months, like I would say around maybe 3 months, I was like, that's it. I'm going to go lift and I'm going to, And I go out there, I do a bunch of lifts, and it was a lot of like lower back stuff because it was, weighted good mornings and like Romanian deadlifts. And I remember at one point, like my lower back just
like spasmed.
Yep.
Yeah.
And at that point, it wasn't terrible, but I was like, I probably should put this weight down. Not going to push anymore. But then within a couple of hours, I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And it was like probably a solid 36 hours of like just severe pain. Like standing up, sitting down, I would just like get stuck with a spasm and I would just be stuck there and of course I've got a 3-month-old, right? So
there's a lot of picking up and holding.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, what have I done to myself? Like, seriously? Right. So I had that, and that wasn't that was the worst one, but there were probably 2 or 3 other times where I was like, ooh, like I could feel like if I'm not careful, I'm going to be back there. And that combined with like, I've got this chronic wrist pain thing going on. That's pretty common for new moms.
Sure.
So all of that has been frustrating for me because I'm somebody who's like, that's it. We're getting back to the gym. I'm getting back in shape. And my body's like, not so fast. And it's like, I want to fix it. Like, I want to be in control of it and be like, nope, we're doing this today. And my body's like, got other plans.
Right. Well, and I think that goes to where a lot of people, again, going back to, you already admitted, so I'm not calling you out on anything, but perfectionist tendencies, where a lot of us had an idea in my head. I'm going to go to the gym at this time and I'm going to do these things and it's going to be amazing. And anything less than that is like,
I might as well have not shown up.
Right. Might as well not shown up. But I'm not, we coaches teach people about this all the time. It's like, yeah, if you have a upper extremity injury, yeah, there's some things you can't do, but there's like 10,000 things you can do. And I think and I'm guilty. So again, me being guilty of this, I'm the same exact way. If I can't like do my workout exactly how I planned it and exactly how I wanted it, well, then I don't even want it anyway. Like nothing else would even work. So I like hearing you say like, okay, I'm working through this, I'm especially, I think even if you hadn't had a child yet, as a business owner and things like that, there's plenty of other obstacles in life that a lot of people might be dealing with. And then adding the extra layer of one, just being out because you had a major medical incident. And then 2, having to deal with the effects of that afterwards. So there's a lot to deal with. So tell me, you said you're on a good kick now. So what does a good kick look like for you?
I started several months ago working with a nutrition coach. I think you probably know Bree at Train, Adapt, Evolve.
Yeah.
Do you know her? Yeah. So I've been working with her and she put together a meal plan for me. And she started me on a reverse diet, which was the first time that I've ever done that, where she wanted to.
Yeah, what is that?
So that's where you're eating a lot.
Okay.
Right. So which not a ton. It was like 1,900 calories.
Right.
But she wanted to make sure that my metabolism got up. And sure. I think that was the first time I know it was the first time I've ever done that. And that was interesting for me to be like, okay, I've spent most of my life either being on or off a nutrition plan. And off means eat all the fun stuff and be full.
Right.
Right. Eat the queso and the margaritas and get full.
Yeah.
And on means hungry, basically. So as you probably share with me, I'm kind of a person of extremes.
Yeah. I can relate.
So this was my first time being like, oh, I'm completely full, but I only ate like mostly healthy food. So that was an interesting experience.
Yeah. It's like, it's kind of almost like, I can see that being, almost frustrating in some ways. It's like,
right. It's almost like it's not hard enough. And like, when I'm on, I'm supposed to be punishing myself all the time. Right. Like, so it was a weird experience. That was an interesting sort of reframe for me. And I also told her from the beginning, like, I'm in a very different place than I have been in the past when I did these strict nutrition plans where, I lost, I don't know, got down to like lost 10 pounds over 14 weeks or whatever. And it was like very lean and I was hungry and I had no alcohol and no this. I was like, I'm just in a different spot right now. I want to get back on track, but I'm not that committed. And so I've done that for probably like 2 or 3 months with her. And then more recently I was like, okay, I've been plateaued for weeks. Like I've been hanging out around 152 for like, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And I'm like, that is it. Like I'm ready to see the scale move.
Yeah.
And so more recently I've been like, okay, fine. I'm going to start logging my food. I'm going to cut some of those extra drinks where I'm like, no big deal. I'm just having a glass or two. Like I'm going to start cutting those. I'm going to get into the gym 3 or 4 times a week. And then recently, because some of my body issues have started to get a little bit better, I've started seeing myself go, oh yeah, I don't need to modify that workout, and being able to do the workout as prescribed again, which I couldn't for months.
Yeah.
And so that's been kind of a nice little flip for me where I'm like, oh, I'm doing the workout as prescribed again. Oh, I'm lifting about 80% of what I used to lift.
That's a good feeling.
Like it's a good feeling. And I wasn't ready for it for a while, but like now I'm ready for it.
Yeah. So in that case, so this is actually kind of like a good, I think a good study, I'll say, is that you've come from a place where it sounds like you would probably describe as less than optimal.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
If you had to define optimal as a destination now, like if you were just going to choose it as something you were working towards, what would optimal health look like for you now in the context of all this stuff you're dealing with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's so tempting for me as such a perfectionist to be like, optimal is no sugar and no alcohol. And like, I would be back down to 130 something with a ton of muscle mass. But like, that's not really what I want right now. You know, like I want to be able to have a glass of wine with my husband and enjoy it.
Yes.
And so I think for me, optimal would be really embodying that thing that I've tried to for years, but it's never really clicked for me, that there are no good or bad foods. And really actually being honest with myself about, do I want this right now? Like, I think I've had a lot of times when I have eaten chips and queso and had margaritas and stuff until I felt like crap. And I'm not sure if I was really honest with myself about whether I truly wanted that. Was I listening to my body, or did I decide this is a binge night?
Yeah.
Right?
So maybe paraphrasing what you're saying is, would you say your version of optimal health would be being in a place of choosing, choosing whatever choice that you made, knowing that you were choosing it and knowing the reason why you were choosing it, and then having the ability to choose otherwise when you felt empowered to do so, or when you felt like it was, it was needed.
Right. And I think just to sort of put some structure around it, it's like for me, optimal would look like eating good quality whole foods most of the time, because I know that makes me feel good.
Right.
And getting to the gym several times a week, 3 or 4 times a week, because I want to feel good in my body. I don't want to feel winded when I climb a set of stairs. I like feeling strong and capable in my body. And so it's nice for me to start feeling like I'm getting back there instead of feeling gross. Right.
Yeah. How do you feel like your health, your physical abilities, we can even think about health broadly. How does it apply to everything else you do? I mean, how is it in service of?
Yeah. For me, it's very integrated, because I do believe that the mind-body connection is very strong. And so when we're at work, right, there's so much that's going on. We think it's all in our head, that we're making these decisions and we're managing our people and we're, putting together a business plan and all those kinds of things. But we're so driven by emotion, and we're so driven by whatever chemical reactions are going on in our body. And so I know myself well enough to know that, like, if I haven't slept, if I haven't eaten well, if I haven't gotten to the gym in a couple of days, I'm not as sharp. Like, I'm not as cheerful. I'm not as resilient. I'm not as perceptive. So it's all very connected for me.
Yeah. I feel the same way. And I hope I'm again, I don't think I'm, saying anything that anyone else wouldn't say, but I think that it's like, you're not going to be able to contribute to the world in the best possible ways, in all the ways that you desire and that you feel like that you've always dreamed of, if this instrument, this vessel of yours is in bad shape. It's not firing on all cylinders. And so I think about my health in that way. And then that's what I think of as optimal. I don't think of, I used to, if you'd asked me probably not even that long ago, 5 years ago or something like that, I might have said 6-pack abs, lifting this much weight, be able to run that fast or whatever. And now I think about it as in the perfect zone in which I can live a life that I love and contribute to the world in the way that I feel powerful and that I deeply desire. And that means I probably am going to have a little more fat around my waist. And that means I probably am going to eat a couple things that, that maybe don't fully support my waistline or whatever. But choosing a loving, joyful perspective on health rather than because you mentioned a little while back about how we oftentimes look at our fitness and our nutrition as a way to punish ourselves for not being healthy enough or whatever it is, so.
Well, and getting back to what you just said, Athan, about about that optimal piece of it being having had like a certain amount of rest. And I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was getting at the point of these things are necessary for me to perform.
Right.
And I don't disagree with that. I do think it's true. Like, I mean, I said that this is all connected, but the flip side of that is also something that I had to deal with over the last several months. So one thing that I learned about myself was that leading up to having Tony, I had really bought into this idea that like, if I log my food and I'm eating whole foods and I'm not having alcohol and I'm not having sugar and I'm getting to the gym 5 times a week and I'm getting enough sleep, then I'm doing all the right things and I can feel good. And so then when a lot of those things just suddenly weren't possible anymore, I found that I had to deal with the flip side of that of actually I was making myself feel worse because I had bought this notion so thoroughly that then I believed, well, now since I don't have those things, I don't have the sleep and I can't get to the gym in the way that I used to. Well, now I just feel like crap. And at a certain point I was like, do I actually feel that bad or am I just, is it in my head?
Have I set a standard?
I've set a standard. Exactly. Yeah. And that was a weird thing for me to process.
That's huge. I mean, that's huge though, because we really do our mind state and our perspectives and our views of things massively drive how we feel about and how we end up performing. And I think it's really wise of you and I hope more people to do that. So like really question your own beliefs about what's going on right now, and it's always a work in progress and it's always evolving and,
Because I remember, just to give an example of this, of like, this is why, zero alcohol and everything perfect is not necessarily my optimal health anymore. Because I remember a couple of times in those first few months when I was really anxious about how little sleep I'd had. Because even after the acute insomnia was over, there were still times where, maybe we didn't have a great night of sleep the night before and now Tony's taking a nap and I'm like, or we've got a babysitter or nanny or whatever. So it doesn't even matter when he wakes up, like I can go and take a nap now. And there would be sometimes I would lay down for that nap and not be able to go to sleep. And I would get up afterwards feeling worse. Because then I was like, I couldn't sleep and like, what's wrong with me? And why couldn't I sleep? And yeah, and I would get into this cycle, right? And there were a couple of times when Chris would just be like, are you sure you need a nap? Like, why don't we just go to the brewery?
Right.
And if he could talk me into getting out of the house, a lot of times I would feel a lot better after I went and had a beer than if I just tried to take a nap that I was convinced I needed, but maybe my body didn't really need, or it just wasn't going to happen today or whatever. So it's like, there's a lot of people who would tell you that like going and having a beer at the brewery when you're suffering from postpartum anxiety is not a good idea. But like there were times when that was what I needed.
Right. Well, and that's the difference is it looks different for all of us. And it looks different for each of us at different times of our life. And the most important thing that you can be doing is exploring new things, understanding we all have kind of like a band of excellence, and kind of understand where the top and bottom limits of that are, at least in some sort of like, over time. And then also, trying to, knowing that things change. Like, for example, again, like after another stage of life, like motherhood, it's going to be a little different. Now you're going to have to explore it again for yourself. And I think it's, if you look at your health like a science project over time and you create new hypotheses and you test them and you kind of see what works, then it kind of makes it a little more fun. And then I think the big thing about, and what you've talked about and what I think everyone listening needs to understand is like, well, why even be healthy? Like if you can understand and attach all of this to, well, what's the point anyway? And a lot of times we're not clear on that. We think we want health for one reason, or we think our version of health looks a certain way because, again, going back to our fears and our insecurities and our vulnerabilities. But if we can just wade through a bunch of that bullshit, we'll get to the real why.
And I think that questions are so important. Like you're starting to get at this, like, why do you want that? And then the answer might be, well, because I'm supposed to, or because it's good for me. Well, what is good for you? How? Like good in what ways, right? Those questions, and that comes to like mentoring and coaching people and everything else. Like those questions can be really powerful.
Yeah. The whole, I might mess up the number, but it's like the 6 whys or something. If someone answers something.
I just heard this for the first time the other day.
Yeah. And I think it's brilliant, and I think it's a great model of mentorship and everything else. If someone gives you an answer and you don't accept it at face value, you say, well, why? And if you can ask them, if you can get, you'll get to the real stuff if you get to that 5th why. Well, okay, well, why is that important? And it's almost always coming down to love and fear. I think at the base of it, Yeah. We are about an hour and 20 minutes in. Yeah, I know.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. And so, and I knew it would be this way with you because again, like, one, I'm so interested in everything you have to say, and I knew that I could talk to you for a very long amount of time. But I also want to give you some opportunities to talk about anything that you thought that I might ask you about, or that you really want to share with the audience. And so my question that I always ask on this show is there anything that you thought I was going to ask you about, that I didn't ask you about, or anything that you kind of wanted to talk about before the show?
The only thing, I feel like we covered a lot of stuff. The only thing that was on my mind that I thought we might talk about was the question of purpose.
Yeah. Okay. That's huge for me.
I think that we have kind of danced around it this whole time, right? Like at the very beginning, you were asking me about how my business started, and we were talking about the fact that like I didn't really have a plan, right? So there's a lot of people who start a business and they're like, this was my vision and I executed on the vision. And that was never me. So I have struggled a lot in my life wondering, what is my purpose? And do I have a purpose? And am I supposed to have a purpose? And what if I don't have a purpose? Does that bother me? And, like that has just, this is one thing that I've learned about myself. If I give myself free time, I get neurotic and start thinking about things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned purpose because I find it to be the most important and most massive part of just a good life, I should say. And I think that a lot of people, like you just mentioned, they struggle with finding their purpose or identifying their purpose or kind of really putting their thumb on it or whatever. And I think one, that means there's more introspection, there's more investigation they need to do. But two, I think a lot of people get too caught up on the right answer.
That's me, I think.
Yeah.
Because I would look around at other successful people and listen to podcasts and things like that. And it seems like everybody who's done anything important had like a mission statement and a purpose. And so I've had so much doubt over the years about like, why don't I have one? Does that mean I'm not allowed to join the successful club because I don't have a purpose?
Yeah, well, I would say that's you actually, it would be just that you maybe aren't able to articulate it clearly right now, but there is a purpose. Like I'm sure that you do have one. It's there. You've been serving it. You've been in service of it. And just because you don't necessarily have the words or like you don't have it written on your letterhead or whatever doesn't mean it's not there. And so what I tell a lot of people is just try a few different ones on, like pick one. And a lot of times we get to choose our purpose. I mean, it's all about choices. And so you kind of pick something that you find that like set your heart on fire, that you would do for free if money weren't a thing. And that is based in love and not fear. And really, then you get to choose it and it'll evolve over time. I think that ultimately there's not like, I don't know that we all just have one purpose in life. I don't think these are my personal private perspectives. I don't think you're born with a purpose. I don't think one is assigned to you by a higher power. I think you get to choose it and you might have a few over time, but I will say that having purpose right up there with like a strong work ethic and a great attitude overcomes everything. Like it's your baseline. It's what stabilizes you. And I personally have a morning practice every single day that I remind myself of why I'm here and what I'm doing and what's really important to me. So I don't get lost in the weeds and all the messiness and all the other shit you can be distracted by,
Yeah, I seem to be okay if I've got a very specific assignment, right? If it's like, okay, morning journaling, like I can pick my top 5 things. This is my purpose today. I'm going to get these 5 things done.
Yeah, for that day.
But it's like the purpose of my life is hard, right? And I think you're right that there's not just one and it can change.
Yeah, but I do think there's like what's the thin red thread that kind of go if you know I've led several workshops in over time, and one of the things that I've tried to do to get help because I think it's so important, I do try to help people find it.
Okay, I think I need this workshop.
Yeah, well, I'm doing one for Bastrop, the special education department at Bastrop School District soon. But one of them is kind of like look back at every job you've ever had. Look back at every hobby you've ever had, like the things that you chose to spend your time on, just like massive, like maybe it's sports and maybe it's some other things. And then try to find the commonality, like where can you connect the dots? Because sometimes we subconsciously choose, we're guided by our hearts and our spirits and our mind state to choose things that even when we've chose them subconsciously. And if you can connect the dots between all of those different things that you spent most of your time on, in there somewhere is your purpose. You can find you can say, well, it's service of other people, or it's fitness, or it's, there's something there, and I think, so that's what I try to help people to try and find when they ask me about it.
That's definitely helpful. I'm glad to hear that
your next
perspective on
journaling.
it.
Yeah. So when you're journaling, you maybe do a couple connect the dot activities, and and sometimes other people can help you with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes people see us more clearly than we see ourselves. Right. And so then it's just accepting.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you think I have a purpose?
You certainly have a purpose. When I see you on fire, when I see you like being, like I mentioned earlier, I'm the most unchained and the most free. It's you are you're sharing with other people. You're kind of like you're giving, you're educating, you're mentoring, and there is a piece of that level of like transparency and vulnerability. And so I do think like there's something around that mentorship, that leadership piece that really has to be a part of your purpose, because that's when I see you just like figuratively, on fire, and so I think it's something like that. I wouldn't say that I think real estate is your canvas for that. I would say I
would agree with that.
Yeah, that's your platform, but I wouldn't say that it's your purpose is directly tied to it. I mean, like think about the joy and love and people to their homes, that they get from that, and I think that's really the core of why you do what you do.
I think you're right about that. I'm going to think on that.
Well, I'd give me a call, bounce it off of me. And
one thing that I read recently that was helpful for me on this topic of purpose was Man's Search for Meaning. Have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you remember when he talks about the monkey undergoing medical experiments?
Yes.
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of a morbid example, but what he talks about is that, just for the audience, since you know what I'm talking about, but that if a monkey is being like experimented on for, let's say, cancer research or something, does that monkey know what the purpose of its suffering is?
Right.
No,
it doesn't.
Does that mean that it doesn't have a purpose?
Right. Yeah.
Right? And for me, that was very like it kind of a sigh of relief. I was like, okay, me not knowing doesn't mean that I'm not doing it.
Yes. And that's kind of what I was going back to earlier, which I 100% agree, is like we subconsciously fulfill our purpose, whether we know it or not, which is a good thing. We can rest easy in that. And I think if you don't know your purpose, like if it's not clear for you right now, having some sort of daily practice in which you're centering yourself, you're finding love, you're sourcing, you're creating your best self, and sometimes that's through fitness and that's through your relationships and all that other stuff. You can kind of hang your hat on the fact that I'm fulfilling my purpose somehow, even if I'm not clear on it. If you're doing the work to be your best self, you taking care of checking some of those boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. This was beautiful.
It was. And I love the directions that the conversation took. Before we let you go, tell everybody where they can find you, what you've got going, if there's anything you want to promote that you've got going on, or all that good stuff, because they're going to want to know.
Okay, great. Well, the best place to find me is on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, Isabel.Affinito. And I'm assuming we'll put that in the show notes too.
Yes, we will.
Because people struggle with the spelling of my last name and my first name. I just have a hard name to spell. In terms of what we have going on right now, biggest thing that I'm focused on is the women on my team. And so I have a team of amazing women, and we love helping people with real estate in Austin. So residential real estate in Austin, anybody who needs help. We particularly love educating and empowering people. That's our gig.
That's awesome. So is there a website for that, for Wire and all that stuff that people might?
Yeah, we have an Instagram account, which is probably the best place to follow us as well. So we can link that in the show notes. But I also share a lot of stuff across my personal page and the business page. So if somebody follows me personally, they'll be able to find us there too.
Perfect. Well, I am just full of gratitude and appreciation for you. I grew today. I learned a ton. I learned more about you. I deepened my connection with you. And I feel like I'm wiser and smarter for having the conversation. And I know everyone who listened all the way through it will also have gained from it. And so just thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And you know that I grow every time that I talk to you too. So
thank you for saying that. Well, all right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for being here, and till the next one.